Now that we introduced you to the different respiratory mechanisms, let's now discuss the principles of movements. In the first principle, each rib may be regarded as a lever, the fulcrum of which lies just lateral to the tubercle. Because of the disproportion in the length of the two arms of the lever, the slight movements at the vertebral end of the rib are greatly magnified at the anterior end. Next, we have the pump handle movement. Here, the anterior end of the rib is lower than the posterior end. Therefore, during elevation of the rib, the anterior end also moves forwards. This occurs mostly in the vertebrosternal ribs. Along with the up and down movements of the second to sixth ribs, the body of the sternum also moves up and down, called pump handle movements. In this way, the antero-posterior diameter of the thorax is increased. Next one is the bucket handle movement. As the middle of the shaft of the rib lies at a lower level than the plane passing through the two ends. Therefore, during elevation of the rib, the shaft also moves outwards. This causes increase in the transverse diameter of the thorax. And such movements occur in the vertebrochondral ribs and are called bucket handle movements. Next one takes thoracic cage as a cone. As the thorax resembles a cone, tapering upwards. As a result, each rib is longer than the next higher rib. On elevation, the larger lower rib comes to occupy the position of the smaller upper rib, which pushes sternum forwards. This also increases the transverse diameter of the thorax. Now, lastly, we have the piston movements. The vertical diameter is increased by the piston movements of the thoracoabdominal diaphragm. Now, what is the piston movement? During inspiration, the diaphragm contracts and it comes down by 2 centimeters, thus increasing the vertical diameter. This movement, being quite similar to the movement of a piston, can be regarded as the piston mechanism. So that was all about the principles of movements. Let's now summarize the factors producing increase in diameters of the thorax. Well, the anteroposterior diameter is increased in the two ways. Mainly by the pump handle movements of the sternum, brought about by elevation of the vertebrosternal second to sixth ribs, and partly by the elevation of the 7th to 10th vertebrochondral ribs. Now, the transverse diameter is increased in the two ways. These are quite opposite to that I told you for the increase in anteroposterior diameter. So do notice the difference here. So the first one is mainly by the bucket handle movements of the 7th to 10th vertebrochondral ribs, and partly by elevation 6th vertebrosternal ribs. Now, the vertical diameter is increased by descent of the diaphragm as it contracts. This is called piston mechanism, as we have already discussed. During inspiration, the diaphragm contracts and it comes down by 2 centimeters. It is aided by relaxation of muscles of anterior abdominal wall. While, during expiration, abdominal muscles contract and diaphragm is pushed upwards. It facilitates an inspiration of at least 400 ml of air during each contraction. In females, respiration is thoracoabdominal, and in males, it is abdominothoracic type. So that was all about the principles of respiratory movements. Hope you have enjoyed the video. For more anatomy videos, keep watching sqadia.com.